As you know, a variable is a memory location where you can store a value. And you briefly saw how to create variables in Java last time. We have to specify the type of the variable, and then we have to give it a name. This is called a variable declaration, which is a statement for creating a variable. Only when you declare the variable, you have to specify the type. But once you declared it, then it is created and you can use it in your program. You only use the name. We've also seen assignment statements where you store a value in a certain memory location, right? And it looks like this. The left-hand side is a name of a variable, and the right-hand side is a value or an expression that can be evaluated, and so you get a value that you can store in that memory location. So let's say we want to create a variable of type int. I can say int x. This is a declaration statement, but nothing will be stored in that memory location because we haven't specified any value. So the first time you specify a value for a variable, it's called variable initialization. This is the initial value that you give to that variable, which can be done in a separate assignment statement like this. So here I'm saying the initial value for x is 10. Or I could do the declaration and initialization in the same statement. I could say int x equal 10. Now that you have that variable, you can use it in your program. For example, I could print x, which will just display the value in the standard output. I could use it as an expression in another variable. For example, I could create another variable y and set the value to be x times 2, right? Because at this point in my program here, x exists and has a value. The value is 10. So this will be evaluated to 10 times 2, and that's 20, and the value of 20 will be stored in y. So if I try to print y, the result is 20. I could also change the value that is stored in x by using other assignment operations. So I can say x equals 5. Okay, so note here that I don't need to specify the type. You only specify the type when you declare the variable. In Java, we also have something called a named constant, which is similar to a variable. You're storing a value in a memory location. But the difference between a constant and a variable is that the constant value cannot be changed. You initialize the constant with a certain value, and that's it. You cannot change it in your program. And the way that you specify that a certain memory location is a constant and not a variable is by adding the word final before the type of that variable. For example, let's say I want to use the value pi in my program, but I don't want to use the number every time. To avoid mistakes, I could store it as a named constant. So I can say final double pi equals 3.14. I could use the value of pi in my program. Let's make x also a double, and I will say x equals, okay, y also, and I'll say x equals 5 times pi. Okay, so this will be evaluated. The value of pi will be used here, so this will be 5 times 3.14, and the result will be stored in x. Okay, so you can use it the way you use a variable. The difference now, I cannot change that value in the program after it has been initialized. So if I try to change it, if I say pi equals 1, I got an error. It says you cannot assign a value to a final variable. So far in my programs, I've been using simple names for my variables like x, y, z, and so on. Variable names are examples of Java identifiers. So the identifiers are names of things. For example, names of variables, names of constants, the name of a class, or the name of a method. These are names that you choose for things that you create in your program. You can choose any name you like, but there are certain rules that you need to follow. The Java identifiers can only consist of letters, both capital and small, digits, the underscore character, and the $sign. Any other character is not valid. Also, the first character cannot be a number. It has to be either a letter, underscore, or the $sign. Okay, here we have a few examples of invalid identifiers. The first one here, employee salary. Space is not a valid character for an identifier, right? So you cannot have an identifier that has 2 words in it. We could change this to something like this. Okay, this will be a valid identifier. Okay, this second example, hello, exclamation mark. The problem with this is exclamation mark is not a valid character in an identifier. The same thing here, 1 plus 2. The plus sign is not a valid identifier. And the last one here, it starts with a digit, and that's not allowed. You can declare multiple variables of the same type in the same line by separating them with commas. So this is a valid statement. What we're doing here, we're declaring 3 variables, num1, num2, and new num, and all of them are of type int. And in here, in the second example, we have double x comma y. What we're doing here, we're declaring 2 variables, x and y, of type double, okay? So this is not one variable called x comma y, because comma is not a valid character in an identifier, right? When you have a comma, that means you're actually declaring multiple variables. Once you have declared a variable, then you can assign values to it. Like here, we're initializing num1 equal 35. This third line is not valid because we haven't specified an initial value for num2. Num2 has not been initialized. Okay, so this third statement actually gives us an error. So if you try this in Java, you're going to get an error here. And if you hover over this icon, you get this statement. Variable num2 might not have been initialized. Okay, so we have to first assign a value to num2. We can either do that here with the declaration statement, or we can have a separate statement here. Num2 equals, let's say, 10. Now the code is fine. This statement is fine. We have num1 equals 5 and then semicolon. Num2 equals 2 plus num1. Num1 equals num2 divided by 3. All of these variables that are used in the expressions in the right hand side are initialized already. So there's no problem here. And not here that we have 3 statements in one line, but they are separated with semicolon. Spaces actually don't count much in Java. You don't have to put these in separate lines. You could, and that's probably the better way to do it just for readability. But this is also fine. Like the code will compile and run just fine. Now this statement here, there's a problem because the left-hand side is an expression, not a memory location, right? Num1 multiplied by num2. This is an expression and it evaluates to a number. So this is not valid. X equals 12 times num1 minus 15.3, right? This is fine. We have X is already declared, so we're initializing it here. And num1 has already been initialized. The rest are just numbers, so we evaluate this expression. Okay, this also has the problem where the left-hand side is an expression, not a memory location, so this is not allowed. The same thing here. This last statement is fine. Right? What we're doing here, we have x mod 5, and this is typecasting. X is actually a double. We're casting it to an int. And we actually have to do that because new num is an int. So if we don't do this, we will get an error. So if you try this, here I initialized x, and then I have this expression new num equals x mod 5 without using typecasting. I'm getting an error that I have incompatible types. It cannot automatically convert a double into an int in an assignment expression like this. So we have to do this, which will convert x into an int first and then take mod 5, and the result of that will be stored in new num. When you have a question about tracing some code and finding the values of variables, it is useful to draw these variables as memory cells and then update their values as you go through the code. So the first statement here, we are declaring a variable of type int called num1. We're then initializing that value to be equal to 18. In the third statement here, we have a second assignment operation. So we're going to change the value of num1. And the value that we will store in it is num1 plus 27. So we evaluate this expression using the existing values. Here num1 equals 18, so 18 plus 27 is 45, and the result will be stored in num1. Then we declare another integer called num2, and we initialize it to be equal to num1, and we also declare num3 and initialize it to be num2 divided by 5. So here num2 equals num1, so the value 45 will be stored in num2. And then num3 equals num2 divided by 5, so it's 45 divided by 5, which is 9. And then num3 equals num3 divided by 4, so that's 9 divided by 4. So the actual result is 2.25, but because num2 is an int, so this is an integral expression, right? So we will discard all the fractions and the result will be 2. So after evaluating all of these, so after executing all of these statements, the values of the variables will be like this. num1 is 45, num2 is 45, and num3 is 2.